everyone! In today's video, I'm going to show you a really adorable springtime Eeyore. He's got flowers around him on a pathway and a butterfly on his head. Super cute. There's lots of tips and tricks for making characters that are standing up different ways, especially if you're working with acrylic that's a little bit particular, like mine is, was not cooperating for this design. I hope that helps you guys out. If you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!
I'm going to begin with kind of a nice grassy pathway, and I'm going to start the pathway with a swath of brown going down the middle. This is a glittery brown. It's so pretty. It's so sparkly. Then with a similarly glittery green, I'm going to be adding green going around it. I am not letting the brown acrylic cure and dry before I start with my green. I'm just going right in with the green, and I'm going to kind of pat them and move them around so that the colors blend slightly on the edges. After that is done, I have those two colors. I'm going to take a grassy green glitter and I'm going to add just a little bit of that over the top of my other green to add a bit more depth to it. Once those have cured, so they're not going to wiggle around at all, I'm going to encapsulate the nail with a layer of clear acrylic to make sure it is nice and strong. Once that is done, you can go ahead and file the nail into shape with your e-file, going over the whole thing, making sure it's nice and smooth. Hopefully, if your sculpting is fairly advanced and fairly well done, you shouldn't have too much filing to do, but don't skip on the filing. There's so much refining that can be done in just a moment with a nice quick file. With purple and pink acrylic, I'm going to really push the whole springtime happiness, bright, finally flowers ideals here, and I'm going to add some flowers in the grass going around my pathway. So I'm going to start with purple and I'm going to place those beads down, and then I'm going to, once the acrylic starts to cure, I'm going to press out 5 times from the middle, and then between those areas I pressed out, I'm going to tuck them in, which will give very quick, very cartoony little flowers. We're not going for realism with these flowers. We're going for, you know, springy, happy little fanciful flowers. I've got the purple ones, and I'm going to add 3 pink ones, 2 on either side of my one on the top, and then 1 next to the one at the tip of the nail. If this was a different shape of nail instead of that long almond, I would do 3 at the bottom as well, but there just wasn't the space to get 3 in at the bottom. So because I don't have quite enough space to get all 3, one of them is sufficient. Plus there's a lot happening with this nail, so we've got plenty going on. On a nail form backing, I'm going to take and sculpt the base of my Eeyore. I was going to say e-file. I say that word so often that that's almost what came out. Sculpt the base of my Eeyore. So I've got a nice blue color, and I'm going to be using that to sculpt the body and the head. This color of acrylic that I'm using is not one that cures ever very strong. It always stays just a little bit spongy and pliable and wiggly, which is unfortunate because then it makes it a little bit awkward to sculpt with for the bigger shapes. But we'll make do. So we've got our little Eeyore body that is as cured as it's going to get. I'm going to glue it to the middle of the nail with some nail glue just so that he's sitting on the pathway. The nail glue was not super impressed by me, and so I'm going to switch tactics and trying to get him stuck down with a bit more of that acrylic, which also isn't my biggest fan. So we're going to make it work. We're going to just hold it there until finally we can let go and make sure it does not tip over. Add a little bit more acrylic and then set this to the side for plenty of time to make sure it's not going anywhere. Continuing to use that blue color, I'm going to add many, many layers to my Eeyore to build up the shape. As you can see, still very, very wiggly, even though it is as cured as it's going to get. And I'm going to use my finger to support behind Eeyore. When I have talked in the past in videos about knowing your products and knowing what works and knowing what doesn't work, and knowing that different brands and different colors within brands might behave differently, this is kind of a very beautiful depiction of what I'm saying. Most of my acrylic powders I would not have to be as cautious with and like support them and be as, I don't know, delicate with. This one I know needs that. It's not that big a deal if it's sculpted as like a color layer on a nail flat and then you're going to encapsulate it with clear. Just fine, no big deal at all. But sculpting something crazy in 3D like this, it needs some more attention. So as I am adding these first several layers, I was just making sure I supported it and that I used my brush in a nice gentle way. I'm going to, like I said, add several layers of the blue color over the top of Eeyore, left and right, over the rump from the back, just going over, making sure it's smooth and even. This color I also know does not want to be filed, so I'm going to try not to have any areas that I will need to file, because that is just going to, it just doesn't go well when you try to do that. So I know that. So I'm going to make sure I don't do that. And if you're curious about what kind of acrylic this is, if anybody's like, well, what is this? So I don't buy it. This is the Cuba Triptych powder, and I don't know what color it is, but it's their icy blue color. I honestly do not really care for the Koopa Triptych powders for sculpting with, but there are some gorgeous shades of color in there, so I do use them anyway. But as far as just the general like texture and feel of them, they're just really not my favorite. However, Koopa's monomers are the best ever. So, you win some, you lose some. After I've got the shape of Eeyore and his 2 legs, I'm going to take a light blue acrylic and I'm going to be padding that out for his belly. See, I'm being a lot more mean with that acrylic than I was with the other blue. Just pressing it a little bit more aggressively than I did with the other blue. So as you're going through and you're doing these different areas and keeping track of what goes where, one thing to try to keep in mind with any design, whether it be this one or another one, is the order of how to sculpt things. So the reason I did the light blue on the belly before adding something like the feet is that I knew it'd be easier to get my brush in to work on the belly prior to having the foot be in the way. So if you can, and sometimes, you don't remember or things just don't work out that way, but just try to be aware of what steps to do when so that you can easily get to everything and just have the most efficient, pleasant, successful sculpting time with your acrylic. And once you sculpt many, many things, a lot of that just becomes second nature and you don't have to think about it anymore. You just know, okay, well now I'll have to do this because of this and now I have to do this because of that. Add the little bit of the lighter blue that goes on the inside of the leg and on the foot. I'm going to be doing that now. If you get too much acrylic, you can always swipe it away if that does occur. And then after you have all of those little light blue areas done for the belly and the feet, your body is basically done. The bulk of the body. So now you're going to add the arm, just like how you did the belly before you did the feet. You want to make sure that you do all that light bluing across all of everything on the body prior to doing these arms. Just take and pull your acrylic down. Now, Eeyore's body is so close together. There isn't like a gappy space between the arms and the body. They just kind of go right down the sides of the body. If there was any bit of a space, you would want to sculpt a base for the feet separately, kind of like we did with the start with the body and the head, and then attach them. But because of just the way that he is, it works to pull it down this way, and it is quite a bit quicker to do it that way as long as that does work. But if it was a different character and the arms were out more away from the body and there'd be nothing to support the acrylic as it was sculpting, then you would need to make sure that you had a base on there first. Keep adding those little details, blend the shoulder out, add a little bit of bulk to the shoulder just to kind of round it out and make sure that it doesn't look like there's this random arm stuck on there, but like it's actually, part of his body. Add the light blue on the insides of the arms on both sides. And then once you're happy with that, then you get to sculpt the face. Eeyore's face is honestly one of the more difficult faces to sculpt because of the 2 colors. He has the blue that is on the upper part of his face and then the lighter tan, kind of pinkish color, sometimes white gray, depends on what photo you see of him. But that color is on like around his snout, nostrils, smile, lips, that area. And if you are like me and you want to try to do as much as you can with acrylic and as little as possible with paint, then it makes it a little difficult because you have to almost do a reverse French tip and leave a little ledge as to where the blue stops. And then the next color, which mine will be like a light tan, continues. So that's what you see me doing on that side. We've got the little ledge. I'm going to butt my tan color up against it and then add the rest of Eeyore's snout area. It does work, but it's just a little more tedious, a little bit more particular to do it that way. Where if you were to paint it instead, it would probably be a little simpler. On the other side, I'm going to do it the opposite way. I'm going to start with the tan color and then I'll butt the blue up to it. Either way, it does work. It doesn't matter which way you go about it, whichever way seems like the right way at the time. And probably you'll end up going back and forth between your 2 colors a few different times until it just looks smooth and continuous from one to the other. The other thing that's kind of fun about this technique versus painting it on, or I guess the benefit to me to doing it this way instead of painting it on, is that acrylic has a clarity because the pigments are suspended in a layer. They aren't flat. They aren't super pigmented and creamy. They don't have that white base. So when you have the things sculpted, I think they look more real. They look more alive than if it is done with paint. So if you were to paint that tan color over the top of the blue, you'd have this really chalky split and it just wouldn't look as continuous and natural. To sculpt our Eeyore's ears, I'm going to take the same color blue that I've been complaining about this whole video, and I'm going to make 2 long petal type shapes on a nail form backing. And then I'm going to pat them out and let them just kind of wait for them to cure. Normally with acrylic, I would wait until they turn matte. This particular one, as I've been saying, it just doesn't quite behave the same. So I'm going to take the tip of my brush and slide it underneath one ear and just check it. Once I can fold it over, I'm going to mostly fold this ear in half. I'm going to repeat for the other side. Once one's done, the other one should be close behind because I did place those beads of acrylic down at about the same moment. I will pick the first one up and I will set that on. I'm actually going to use my gloved finger to press it against the side of Eeyore's head. And then I'll grab the other one, do the same thing, press it against the side of Eeyore's head. You want the openings of the ears to face forward where the fold goes towards the back. Once the ears are about in the right position, take more of your blue acrylic and you're going to add it right over the top of the base of the ears so that they are completely attached and they aren't going to fall off or like pop off at all. Now, because my ears were a little too big, I'm actually going to take a manicure scissors and I'm going to cut them. Probably the only benefit of this acrylic being a little bit more spongy all the way through is that it trims very easily with a little manicure scissors if it's thin. So that worked out okay. Now I'm going to take the same color, nail form backing once again. This seems a little bit deja vu-y, and I'm going to be making a long strip of blue acrylic this time. This will be for Eeyore's tail. So I'm going to make basically a long ribbon shape, nice and straight-sided, nice and flat. Once it's mostly cured, so it's got a little bit of wiggle in it, but it's pretty much going to hold its shape. Not quite there yet. We're going to wait another second. There's no harm in testing these things and then deciding, no, not quite yet. Pick it up, and then you're going to attach one side of it to Eeyore's bottom, and then wrap the rest of the tail kind of around the side so that it goes down next to his foot. If it's too long, same thing. Trim off the extra. Easy peasy. Grab more of your blue acrylic and smooth out the shape. Normally, this wouldn't have any lumps and bumps and weird spots in it, but again, weird acrylic, so it's going to do all sorts of strange stuff that I would rather it didn't. I'm going to smooth all of that weird stuff out, and I'm going to make sure it is nice and smooth going all the way down. And then after you have, you're happy with the tail, it does look nice and smooth. Everything looks like it should. You can switch to black acrylic and add the little mane of hair going down Eeyore's forehead a bit and then down his neck. As you are doing it with that, I'm going to use very dry beads of acrylic. So when you're picking up your bead of acrylic, there is usually kind of a rhythm that as you have experience, you fall into when you're grabbing acrylic. And if you use the same brand all the time in the same monomer, you get this very comfortable, just little pick up, lay down, pick up, lay down. But when you want to mess with the consistency of your acrylic for one reason or another, you might want it thinner, you might want it thicker, you need to adjust to that rhythm. So you got your brush, you dip it a certain amount of depth into your monomer. If you want it to be a little drier of acrylic, either dip it less or hold it in your powder slightly longer. Back to a nail form backing, I'm going to sculpt two sides of a butterfly's wings. So I'm going to do the one side going one way, the other side going the other way, little tiny butterfly. Make sure that as you're doing this, you do try to keep them symmetrical from side to side as butterflies are. And then I'm going to use pink acrylic and I'm going to sculpt a little bow for the end of Eeyore's tail. This is the last two parts of acrylic that are being sculpted separately off of the nail. We're almost to the final end of this crazy ride. This is one of those designs that just has so many details, so many elements, so much in it that you kind of just have to be prepared to, go the long haul with this. With the bow, this time I'm going to do it in kind of the like figure 8 shape and then fold the two sides of the 8 in towards the center. And now attach the two halves of your butterfly onto the top of Eeyore's head. This is one of the cutest little positions, I think, for Eeyore. I absolutely adore the butterfly on the top of the head thing. He's not fazed by it. It doesn't necessarily, it's not great, but it's okay that there's a butterfly on his head. He's all right with it. He'll accept it. I used this position in a Winnie the Pooh. It was Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and Piglet and Eeyore for a spring set last year that was painted and all pastels and so pretty. I can put a link to that video in the description box below. I do highly recommend that one because it is just such a beautiful vintage pastel look that if you are a Winnie the Pooh, Eeyore, etc. fan, definitely check that one out. And then I'm going to attach the bow to the end of Eeyore's tail, and then back to black acrylic, I'm going to be adding the little button that is holding his tail onto his butt. And now switching to acrylic paint, I'm going to be adding all of the little details that were not able to be completed with acrylic. hopefully now that I'm adding those little spots onto the butterfly, you can kind of see what I was saying about the opacity and the chalkiness that acrylic paint tends to have, and why, just to keep a continuity with the texture of his body, I wouldn't recommend using acrylic paint for that. So I added my spots to my butterfly, and now using black paint, I'm going to be going through and adding some of the stitch lines across Eeyore's face. You can add as much or as little of these details as you want. If you were to minimize it and not do as much detail, especially like those stitch lines going down the center of the face, because if they get too thick, they will be kind of, they will interfere with the look of Eeyore. So they have to be very thin in order for them to look well balanced. But if you were to skip some stuff, the things I would make sure that you don't skip are Eeyore's eyes and eyebrows, the pink in his ears, and his nostrils. I would even say it would be okay if you wanted to not put in his smile, because Eeyore's smile isn't necessarily something he's famous for. So if you wanted to skip that, I think that would be okay. Because I want to make sure I add all those details in that I possibly can, am going to add stitch lines on his feet, on his arms, kind of a little bit of outlining going from his legs to his body. Anywhere I can, I'm going to add just a little bit of definition in the form of a thin black line. If black lines are something that you find to be very scary because it is so bold and it is so final feeling, one thing that you can do is, instead of using black, try a dark brown. I know, or not dark brown, dark blue. That might seem like, what's the difference? It's still a dark color, but they don't seem quite as scary. So if, you're just a little worried about going straight in for black lines, definitely just try a dark blue and then finalize the lines that you like the best with your black. Add some yellow on the center of your butterfly and in the center of the flowers. Add some gel sealer going over the background, your green and your brown. Make sure that that looks nice and sparkly. It is sparkly, so we might as well let those sparkles show. Some matte top coat over Eeyore. And that is it. He's all done and he's so cute. This is definitely design where if you complete it, give yourself a huge pat on the back, because there is so much work built into this teeny tiny adorable little nail, and he is just so adorable and really embodies the feeling that I am hoping to find soon enough once we actually get spring weather where I live, which I don't know, maybe we'll get that by July. Seems like how it goes. I hope you guys like it, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. Bye.